Here's the deal. Sounding like crap? That's a choice. Your station doesn't have to flatline and put off a limp and just blah sound. Those days are done. I am Jeff, the radio DJ dude, and it's fix-up time. We're gonna fine-tune your radio station sound, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I didn't feel like I had the necessary juice to make this happen. But good news, I've got audio guru, former radio and TV engineer and news anchor Bob Cervera here, and he's going to show you how to sauce up your station's sound with pro processing tips to actually keep your listeners coming back for more. Bob, just jump in and tell us, why is audio processing so important for our radio stations?
You want everything kind of evened out so you don't have to have people running toward any sort of volume control to either turn things up or turn things down. You want not listening to radio to be a passive experience, but you don't want them actually having to physically do anything to listen to your music. And another thing is, listeners expect big sound. They're used to how radio is supposed to sound, and they don't notice so much when it's there, when you have that big sound, but they sure notice when it's not there. And that's what audio processing does. And lastly, it sort of creates a signature sound for your station. You know, audio compression and processing is as much of an art as it is a science, because there are so many things that interact with each other, and it's an art really to get those things all to work together. And when you get them just right, you get your signature sound for your station. And that's what broadcasters crave, and it's for a reason.
For years, so many legacy FM stations, they guarded those secret settings with their life, because that was their secret sauce. Mm-hmm. Their audio processing settings. And once again, just so people realize, we have such the benefit of having access to free tools. I mean, your favorite FM, they have sunk how much? Now, the premier sound processing piece of gear for an FM station, I guess, or at least it was back in the day, it was an Optimod sound processor.
Well, I know today the latest Optimod system that's out there, and Optimod stands for optimum modulation, which, you know, kind of defines what it does. But the best Optimod, which is the gold standard for radio station sound, latest one, last time I looked, it's about $10,000. And speaking of how the settings are guarded, those settings are actually under physical lock and key. So nobody else can get to them except the engineer, the person with the key to change any of those settings or even see what they are.
That is so incredible. But it shows you, once again, just dotting that I of what you said, listeners, they may not know it. They may not understand, I'm listening to this great station because they have such optimal sound processing. No, we register it subconsciously. It affects the listening experience when you're sending out the optimized signal. And so much of this, we have to just say right up from the beginning, is subjective. Audio is such a subjective experience to a point. There still is crap audio, which that's what we want to help everyone avoid.
And when I show you a program out there that you actually turned me on to, Stereo Tool, boy, you can go down some real rabbit holes real fast and come out with some bad sounding audio, even though it's an incredible piece of software.
A lot of times it gets us into trouble. We give too many newbies too many new tools, and then the crap souffle starts baking in the broadcasting oven. And hey, I'm guilty of that, because I think even a couple of days ago I shared with you one of my signature crap recipes for some sound that I modified in that program we're going to share with y'all. And it was way too overdriven and overprocessed. And that's also what we're going to talk about, avoiding some of the cardinal sins of audio processing. So people don't drown in the sea of audio processing options. Let's just zoom out to start things off and explain some just basic fundamentals across the board, no matter which audio processing program they're using, whether it's the one baked into RadioDJ or in this other incredible tool that we're going to share called Stereo Tool down the road. So what are some key functionality in any audio processor?
A limiter is probably the godfather of audio processing. And actually, back in the AM days in the 1930s, it was an absolute must to have a limiter, because if an engineer who was literally just working on the volume controls live, if they let it spike too much, it would blow the transmitter and they would be off the air. So a limiter was the very first audio processor. Now, if you take a limiter and you increase the volume going into it, you essentially have automatic gain control, or AGC, because what's happening is everything that's quiet is now leveled up a bit, but the limiter is keeping it from going too loud.
That's a really important distinction. So people will see that. Automatic gain control, AGC, even in RadioDJ, there's 3 settings, I think low, medium, and high. So what that is doing, it's providing a limiting function, but it's also pumping in some gain too.
Correct.
Okay, so we have the limiter, we have AGC, and then something else we see a lot is compressor. So what is that doing?
Like AGC is like a great big limiter. Compression is like great big AGC, automatic gain control. So now if you're able to do things like adjust how quickly it responds and how quickly it releases the signal, now you're starting to get into compression. And those are important because that's when you're starting to craft how your station will sound once you start getting into those kinds of adjustments.
And now something else in RadioDJ is EQ. I think most people have a basic understanding of EQ. You're adjusting your frequencies on the spectrum.
That's exactly what's happening. When you do compression, it does a couple of things. First of all, what you really want, let's take a drum kit, for instance. What you want as a listener is exciting sound. You want to be able to, when you're listening in with a good pair of headphones, you want to hear that punch. You want to hear that bass drum. You want to hear the snare. You want to hear the cymbals. You want to hear the crash. But compression is doing exactly the opposite. It's squeezing all that down to make sure it's not punching too hard, or it's not. If you have something that's quiet, it's now louder. So you don't have those dynamics. You don't have that punch. But when you've got compression kind of working against you, there are ways to mitigate that. And one of the ways is with EQ. For instance, once you start compression, you tend to start rolling off some of the bass. It doesn't seem as loud anymore. So if you figure out which frequencies are affecting your music and you can pump those up a little bit, you're not really making them punch more, but you are making them a little louder and giving them a little more presence. And that's what you need to kind of overcome what compression does.
And lastly, at least within the RadioDJ application, is something as a stereo boost or stereo enhancer, it says. I mean, a lot of people shut that off, but just so people understand, what is that?
It's a system called psychoacoustics. And what it tries to do is widen the stereo sound. So it sounds like the sounds that are coming from your left ear or your right ear are coming from a farther area away, even though they actually aren't. It's using phasing in order to do that. And there are good and bad about it. So yeah, that kind of widened stereo presence sounds kind of cool, but you tend to lose some things, especially because it uses that phasing. So certain frequencies start getting kind of buried, especially I've noticed vocals when you start widening that too much.
And doesn't some of it even just become a waste when people end up listening on their phone with this little speaker? Now, This is my separation right here. It's 1.5 inches of separation. How much more am I really going to get? Maybe I get 2 inches of separation. Wow, wall of sound. So
Almost.
yeah, exactly. So, okay, this is good. I think that is a good overview. So when we dive into some of these tools, people will understand when they see some of these labels on top of the tools: compressor, EQ, AGC. The big problem about a channel like this when it's radio, it's audio. I mean, but it's not very exciting to talk about. So let's show you, let's put a picture to all this hot air. So let's start small. Let's at least jump into something that everyone has access to if you are a RadioDJ user. And I've heard the latest version of Radio DJ, at least the recording of this video, 2.0.4.5, actually has gotten quite a boost, and the audio processor built in delivers some decent results. So let's start there. Let's show you what you already have under that hood, and then we'll give you a much better option, which is another free tool called Stereo Tool.
Jeff, the first thing we want to do is go down to audio processing down here at the bottom left, and that brings up a window for audio processing. The first thing we want to do is come up to about 100 because we do want maximum volume. We want the signal to be feeding this audio processor as much as possible. If you go under, say we go to 50%, then anything that should be over 50% is not going to get processed. So we want to bring that right up to 100 just to begin with. And it's important to note that you should probably use the best quality of audio you can. Try to stay away from MP3s if at all possible. I usually go with WAV files, WAV, or FLAC, FLAC. But if MP3 is all you've got, then that's all you've got.
Even before you import any, let's say if you are stuck with MP3, because I'm guilty. A lot of my library, is made up of MP3s, but I run them through a program that I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's auto leveling, performing some actions to prevent clipping. So it's looking at the levels of it's normalizing all the levels of those files before you even import them.
That's a good point. Part of the problem with using MP3s is they already have some of that compression. So you're going to already be compressing something that's already compressed. So the more you can stay away from things that are compressed and use files that tend to have more dynamics, which are waves and FLACs, the better off you're going to be overall. But, if all you have are MP3s, then that's all you've got, then go with it.
But just make sure that you also are using, quote unquote, the highest quality MP3 based on, the bit rate. You don't want like 28 if you can find like a 320.
To use a phrase that you use often, crap in, crap out.
You read my mind. That was next. Okay. So we want to make sure our chain volume is 100%.
Mm-hmm. Then the next thing to work on would be AGC. And by the way, this is a great thing to use for experimenting, to find out what some of these things do and how they change your sound. A great place to experiment. So AGC would be the first thing I turn on. These buttons turn on and off each section of this audio processor. I kind of like medium for the AGC automatic gain control. You have hard, medium, and soft, but medium seems to work pretty well for me. The next thing I would work on is compressor, and this is where you really start changing your sound and your audio. I can turn that on as well. And over here on presets, you've got a couple of various ones that do different things. So you can do that. Now notice what's not happening here is as I change through these, it's not changing the settings here. I kind of wish it would, because I'd like to see what these settings are doing when you change to various presets, but this audio processor just doesn't do that. So if you want to do something that you're able to play with, you have to come here to custom values, and now you can start messing with these things. And one thing I want you to notice, I'm going to change the gain here. Watch these meters up here. As I change the gain, and this is what we were talking about earlier about changing the levels. As I change the gain, look what's happening to those meters. Now it's pegged all the way down to nothing. Okay. And then I can bring the audio lower to a point where you don't see it at all. So the nice thing about this is you're able to see exactly what you're doing. Anybody who has worked in audio knows that you want to get to a point where you just barely kiss that red, which is probably right about there for this particular song that's playing, Crazy on You by Heart, one of my favorite albums, Dreamboat Annie. I tend to like an attack rate that's a little bit long, because that allows you to get that initial punch, because it doesn't affect the audio until after that punch. And 250 seems to be a reasonable way to do that here. The release is at about 100, and that's when it backs off, when it stops compressing, how long it takes to do that. And these are in milliseconds. And then ratio is important too, because the bigger the ratio, right now we're at a 4-to-1 ratio. So anything that 1-to-1 would be no compression at all. When you go to 2, now you're doubling how much compression, and then it just goes up exponentially from there. And 4 to 5 are a couple of reasonable numbers. Once you start going beyond that, you get what's called compression fatigue, and people who are listening kind of almost get tired of listening to it because they have to be so active in turning on that mechanism in the brain that listens to audio. And it's just tiring to do that. And threshold is where things start being affected by compression. I want to start hearing the compression happen when anything hits about minus 14 dB. I've found that to be a pretty good place to start. Mess with these. Have some fun. Don't go down rabbit holes, but have some fun with it. You're going to learn a lot in a half hour playing with these settings and understanding what they do.
Exactly. And like we said, so much of this is subjective, and your ears will be the guide. So take that Q-tip out, Earl, and really pay attention. And I think another important thing, I know you're wearing headphones, but when you think about a recording studio, when your favorite albums are mixed, most of the time the engineers are using the monitors. They're just listening with speakers because I think you get a truer sense of the signal because you're now dealing with acoustics, how the sound interacts with the air and the space. So I think these days it's smart to kind of fine tune your station sound with a decent pair of speakers, monitors.
That's absolutely.
And then you progress because once again, we're in the earbud age and a lot of people will be listening with plastic radiation emitting devices in their ear holes.
I usually start with headphones and then I take my sound over to the stereo in my living room. Then I take it to my car. Anywhere else I can listen, because you will notice that it sounds different everywhere you go. And this is so subjective that sometimes you'll come back the next day and think, wow, that sounds horrible after you've perfected it.
Right. It just depends how sober you are when you're listening. So that also is part of your metric. You said it. And I think it's really exciting for people to tune in their car. And also it gives you the feel, kind of the big timer effect of, oh my God, my station's on the radio right next to all my favorite FMs. But in that listening environment, that's just really a great way to demo your sound. If you're in a 1978 Pinto, well, maybe put your headphones on. Make sure you have 2 fresh AA's in your Walkman, but you don't want to use the Pinto's sound system. Just hearing it in that, closed capsule environment is a great way to kind of listen to your sound. But if you're doing it that way, then becomes the issue, since we're running internet radio stations, how do I make tweaks in, the car? That's when you can maybe bring your laptop and do a screen sharing environment using TeamViewer with your radio station computer. So you can bring up a screen like Bob's and make, changes on the fly and give it a couple seconds for the stream to catch up. And then you can hear your, changes real time. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I think the car is a great environment to listen. And yeah, so if we were to break it down, you could start headphones, studio speakers, and then the car. And even, you're wearing very nice headphones, but most people, are listening, once I said, cheap earbuds. So even see what a more inferior, inner ear listening device sounds like, because it may be a little more tinty, more high end, and then just figure out for your format. And this is, I think, another important thing. Different formats, different styles of music require different processing profiles. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. But I wouldn't absolutely discount those cheap earbuds either, because some people are listening to your station that way too. And you really want sound that's the best it can be across the entire spectrum of possible listening environments.
back to our audio processor on Radio DJ, we have EQ, 10 bands. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
to choose?
This for what I have here, I've noticed that this seems to sound best. I'm boosting the bass a little bit, and that seemed to give it a little more punch. And then I'm bringing up the because I've got stereo enhancement. Let me turn that on. Because I've got stereo enhancement at 2, it's usually at 1. I'm losing some of the vocals, so I brought up the mid range just a little bit, where vocals tend to live, and that's really about it. But the EQ does help mitigate what compression has done.
Well, a lot of this is subjective. There are some definite do's and don'ts. And I think a lot of people, when they see EQ, like, oh, look at how far I have to slide with this fun little blue square. I'm going to pump it up to the top, because I can. Well,
Finesse.
and just like your listeners can and will tune out because you have pumped it all the way to the top. Yeah, small. I mean, it's just like when you're cooking, you don't want a cup of salt when the recipe just calls for a pinch. These are your seasonings here, and a little goes a long way with EQ. I mean, you don't want to jack up your highs above 3 or 4 dB, because that becomes more of a harsh listening experience. I know we have high and low frequency roll-offs, and we'll see that when we get to Stereo Tool. Radio DJ doesn't provide that, but basically what that means is there's frequencies that the human ear, just they can't perceive. Audio in those frequencies can cause some rumble and unnecessary, but let's just say noise. So it's best to roll all that off. Now, to me, isn't 32 in that range where we'd want to completely roll that off?
That's a totally plausible thing to do. This is a good time to experiment. If you're hearing in some of your listening environments that you are getting some rumble, and it's low frequency, it's something you feel more than you hear at that frequency. Yeah, then you need to back off on it. Right. These are some quick settings I did through through my headphones. I didn't take this into other listening environments because I usually use Stereo Tool. I don't use this particular one. So these are just quick settings that I kind of set up.
Let's jump back up to the compressor for a second, because another school of thought, and I'd love to hear your point of view, is with radio compression, attack fast and release slow.
That's certainly a plausible thing to do. My personal preference is all about getting that punch, and having a longer attack allows you to get a little bit more of that punch. Now, the problem with that, what you run into, and this is probably the reason why you've been hearing that you should attack fast, is if you don't have it in the right place, if you don't have your attack and release in the right places, your audio could get to a point where it sounds like it's breathing, where you're getting some loud mountains and you're getting some low valleys in how loud your audio is. It kind of sounds like it's pumping and backing off, pumping and backing off. That's what I usually do is I listen for that when it starts happening, and then I back off on it, and to try to get as much of that punch as I can. Different songs are going to sound different, so you've got to listen over quite a few songs to find out if that breathing is happening with your compression.
That's a really good point. Maybe for people when they're testing this on their own, just pick 3 songs, maybe a very dynamic, like let's say an upbeat, loud rock song that's really driving, where you have those big, bold highs, some drum hits, and maybe a quieter song, a love song. And then you could just have like a regular mid-tempo with not a lot of change. And, play each one of those songs and adjust your compressor to see how that interacts with the sound. And you do want to avoid that pumping, because once again, that can cause, fatigue.
Exactly.
Typically, which settings would cause pumping?
It's a combination of the attack and release. They both work in tandem to make the audio, how quickly the compressor starts working on the audio, how quickly it starts working on it, and how quickly it stops working on it. So it's a combination of the two.
Is there ever a situation where you almost just set your release to, let's say, infinity, where it never releases?
Oh gosh, I suppose if you're an FM program director and you want audio that sounds like 11, but the FCC wants you at 9.9.
So you can't get, more loudness, but you're losing all, obviously, your dynamic range.
Exactly. Yeah, your dynamics are going to be totally squashed. Your needles will not move.
And this, once again, is all going to be decided by your ear holes at home. So figure out what works best for you. But keep in mind, your listening device will taint your whole experience and your sound if you are listening on inferior headphones or speakers, thinking that your listener is going to be interpreting the sound the same way. They're not. So it's like trying to adjust, color on a black and white video editing system. May have some issues. With this screen still open, now we're going to take you to the preferred plugin, the preferred processor. But before we leave RadioDJ, once we use Stereo Tool, isn't it important to shut off all these sound processing settings?
Totally. I'm glad you brought that up. That is a very important point.
Yeah, I get we're turning all these off, but
Right.
in terms of the master volume or chain volume, do you still want that at 100?
I usually keep it at 100. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt anything, and it'll give Stereo Tools now the best chance to really work on that audio and have as much volume as it needs to work with.
Great.
So I usually keep that right at about 100. So let me explain first kind of what Stereo Tools is going to do. And before I do that, I'm going to click back on EQ here for a reason. Imagine if every one of these frequency spectrums had its own compressor. You know what that's going to do for you is, let's say you have a loud bass drum that's just booming on your audio. That's going to affect the entire audio spectrum. But if you have that only on one of the frequencies, it's not going to affect the rest of the audio. And that's kind of the basis. That's where Stereo Tools kind of takes over, because it now allows you multi-band compression. So,
right. And just for clarity, within RadioDJ, this is single band compression.
Exactly.
It's affecting all the frequencies with these settings, instead of having the flexibility to target specific frequencies. Okay, buckle up, put it on your crash helmets. This is Stereo Tool.
So I've got Brandy or a Fine Girl running right now by Looking
I hope
Glass.
So.
And
got my
here
request.
we go.
I actually requested that one for this demo.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, well, thank you very much.
Not only do I like Brandy's shape, but I like the shape of her waveform, baby.
Mm-hmm.
And these are some beautiful forms.
And better warmed.
Yes.
Okay, we're looking at Stereo Tools now, and
oh my God, this is too much.
It's mind blowing, isn't it?
Of this.
But there are some basics that you can get started with this, and that's why playing with the RadioDJ audio processor is so important, because now you're starting to understand and learn what some of these settings are doing. This is your input waveform here on the left, and here on the right is what's coming out. And ideally, what we want to do is make these peaks, the up peaks and the down peaks, hit these lines, but not chop them off, because once you do that, that's the equivalent of going past 0 dB. You can see my meters here as well. Here are the two left and right input meters, and here are the output meters. I've got a feeling something really loud is playing right now, because those output meters are pretty well pinned. But if you look at these waveforms, they're hitting, but they're not chopped off. And that's the important thing to remember. And with every portion of Stereo Tools that you get into, you want to make sure your inputs going into those tools and your outputs are keeping your audio within that spectrum here.
Right. Should we start at the top of I/O and kind of go down the list? So
yeah. I/O here is in and out. This is what's coming into Stereo Tools and what's coming out. So we go to sound card here, and Normally what you'll do, since you're not working with an FM transmitter, most likely, you have FM outputs, you've got normal outputs, but let's go to input first and only just one input. You set whatever input you want from this list. And a lot of times it's going to be from a program called Voicemeeter, which I've never known anybody not to run Voicemeeter who has an internet radio station, but Voicemeeter has various ins and outs that you can tie into stereo tools. And so you pick your input here, and normal output is probably the one you're going to want to use to feed your output to your stream.
A lot of people may not use an audio encoder, and this is basically what takes a signal from RadioDJ and then now stereo tool and then sends it to your station online. The audio encoder encodes your signal and then pushes it on, either if you're using Live 365, which is my radio station's host, or your own web host. That's the kind of your transmitter, in essence, your audio encoder. Some of them accept a plugin file, either VST or other plugin file, which Stereo Tool also comes in that flavor. It can be used as a plugin in addition to a standalone app.
Right.
I think we're seeing the app right now, correct?
Yeah, this is the app, and I haven't played around a lot with the VST, but from what I can tell, and from the discussion you and I have had, it seems as though the app is if you can do the app, I would go that route. It seems to be a little more forgiving when it comes to ins and outs.
Right. And or for some, the nice thing about the plugin, because I use SE Caster, which is an audio encoder, which I don't think has been updated in 10 years, but still very robust, and my uptime is incredible. It never crashes. And the nice thing to be able to load that plugin into the chain within that app, I'm never opening Stereo Tool as a standalone app, and I'm not having to configure the outputs because it knows process the sound in the encoder and then send that out. So first, check on your audio encoder and see if it does allow you to integrate plugins. Some do. SE Caster is great. It's free. Other encoders do, but of course, they want you to swipe your credit card for that functionality. But SE Caster is great, or you roll it this way. You do the standalone Stereo Tool app, but just know Stereo Tool also comes in a couple different flavors of plugins. So it's very robust with any system. Anything else in the I/O?
That's really about it. It's how you're getting the signal in and how you're getting it out. Those are the two important things about I/O.
Okay.
Next, we'll go to processing. And you gave me an interesting challenge, Jeff. You asked me to hit on the 4 important things to work on. 4 things out of all these. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
but I came up with them. The first one is the godfather of audio processing, like I talked about earlier, and that's hard limit output. So that will notice what happens when I turned it off. Look what happened to the output meter.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Blood is coming out of your listeners' ears. Turn it on for the love of humanity.
So a hard limiter on, and there it goes. So that's important. The next one is AGC. So we come down to AGC here on this side. And you've got a couple ways to do this. Current AGC sounds pretty gosh darn good. Mm-hmm. It gives you 2 bands, upper and lower band, for bass and mid to upper frequencies. But I'm telling you, look at all you can do here. Here's where the bass rolls off. Here's where the mid range and these are all variable. You can change these. Now, the nice thing about Stereo Tool is you can save what you're doing. And what I normally do is save all settings. And now I can save these things. And I normally put a date on them and which version on that date I saved. So when you start going down that rabbit hole and start getting that crap out sound, you can go back to something that you knew at least sounded decent.
That's so important.
And
Yes.
load it back up. Yeah. Yeah. That has saved me so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And getting to know this. And it's amazing how everything interacts with each other. There is just unlimited. There are hundreds of adjustments, but unlimited possibilities because of how everything interacts with each other. And that's where it really becomes an art. So AGC would be the second one.
Okay.
Then comes multiband.
Go real quick. Go back to AGC because we want to chew this up a little more for people. When you're looking at this, tons of options. We really want to zoom into the levels section. And let's talk about drive and threshold. And how are these two playing with each other and why are they important?
Mm-hmm. Remember when I explained how AGC works? It's pretty much a limiter on steroids. Mm-hmm. So we're forcing more audio to the limiter so that quiet passages sound louder, but they're being capped off at 0. And that's what drive does. Drive determines how much level is going into your automatic gain. So I'm giving it plus 6 decibels of extra audio to work with. Then the threshold, it really doesn't do anything past 0, but it'll give the audio a little more presence. Watch what happens when I bring it down. Watch the audio level here when I start bringing this down. It's starting to work less and less on the threshold. You're seeing more and more of those peaks, and I can get it all the way down to where it's pretty much not doing anything now at this point.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So 0 is pretty much the upper level, and I give it just a touch more than that. And the reason I can get away with that is because of how whoops. Oh boy, that just took off on me. Because of the way I have my multi-band set. It allows me to get away with going at +1 here.
To recap, go back to the first. Where did people find the hard limiter? Because
hard limiter, yeah. When you go to the main processing tab here, hard limiting lives right here down in the right central portion of the screen.
And that's just on or off, or they're settings.
Right, yeah. It's just on or off. There's off, and now we're making ears bleed.
Yeah.
And there's on. And we're back down to where it should be.
Great. Okay. So hard limiting AGC. And what is next on Bob's top 4 countdown?
Next is multiband. And this is what I was talking about before, where we can apply compression to various frequency spectrum areas. So one loud frequency, such as a kick drum, is not going to affect the entire audio, the entire song. It's only going to affect the portion of that frequency that it's working on. And here are the various bands. I've got 7 bands here that I'm working with. Stereo Tool actually has 2 multi-bands. And you know, when I first opened this up, I thought, holy cow, look at this. I can go to 9 bands here. And then when I bring in 9 bands of multiband 2, I can do 18 bands of audio compression. Trust me, more is not better in this. And I learned that the hard way. I spent hundreds of hours trying to work with those 18 bands of compression. You know how many Orban uses? You'll never guess.
6?
5.
Wow.
Yeah. 5 bands of compression, but they have other tricks up their sleeve that allows them to get away with using only 5. I found for what I've been working with, 7 seems to be the magic number for me, and I'm only worrying about 1 multiband. I don't need to pull my hair out with 2.
Right.
The cool thing about stereo tools is when you first determine how many bands you're going to use. Let's use Orban's 5 band compression. Let's go ahead and hit that. Here's something that comes up. Do you want to load the default frequency settings for the newly selected number of bands? Heck yes. Start there. And then you've got a starting point, something that's going to sound decent. Now, again, when you get into how these things are going to work. You've also got drive and output level. I've got a lot of drive on this, but I'm making it up with the output level. Notice my drive is up to 14 decibels, but my output level is only at minus 20. And I had to do that because the compression is bringing that so much louder. What you need to remember is when you're compressing signals, they actually do sound louder because you're bringing more of the quietness up to a higher level. So overall, that tends to start making your sound louder. So you've got to compensate with that, with an output level. So these settings tend to work with me, and they are, again, this is important. Make sure your peaks are not getting cut off, but they are reaching where the peaks should be. You can come here to the bands and start messing with how the bands, the frequencies on the bands. Look at that. Imagine trying to get a handle on that. But once you start playing around and start understanding what things are doing, it will begin to get clear. But the important thing is when you do choose how many bands you're going to work with on your multi-band, go ahead and start with the default, and that'll be a great place to start.
Okay, so at this point, just choose the 5 bands. Let Stereo Tool plug in their default settings. We'll move on to number 4. What's the 4th setting people should be mindful of?
Yeah, the fourth one we've kind of already talked about, and that's making sure that your levels are in good shape the entire way through. Make sure your compression in and out is good, and your multiband in and out are good and are not clipping. You mentioned earlier about the bandpass and roll-offs, and you can do that here with stereo tools. It's bandpass here. Right now, I've got mine set to remove audio below 20 hertz, but if you want to roll off, you can do that here. You can start rolling off it. One thing I should mention, when you press and hold down the control key, that gives you a little finer.
Yeah, more granular control over the sliders.
Right. So there's a 50 hertz roll off if you need to remove audio below 50 hertz. And the same thing for the upper level. If you want to start removing audio, here it is, removing the audio. Everything above 14,600 hertz is not being heard because I've rolled it off.
Or if you even want an easier step 1 approach to Stereo Tool, there are some really cool presets that it ships with. Let's click on the presets tab and we'll show you. I spent like way too much time on this the other day, listening to a number of different, baked in sound settings from broadcasters all over the world. A lot of European, broadcasters have shared their settings, and it's kind of interesting to see the European ideal sound versus, an American sound profile. But if you go to the presets in Stereo Tool, you have a lot to choose from. And let's say you really like 80% of the sound that's coming out of a preset. Well, that's where you then could jump in under the hood and make those final tweaks to maybe dial it into a sound that's more to your liking. So the preset can get you, a good portion of the way there or all the way there. I have found, maybe you agree, Bob, some of the presets are just way too full frontal, too much in your face. They're kind of overcooked. But if you like other, components of that sound, just dial down maybe the AGC. And I found some of the AGC settings in the presets are way too jacked. I mean, if you go to AGC on your screen, some of the levels, the drive is set to plus 20. On the preset. Yeah.
That is a wall of sound.
That is a wall of sound and no movement. It's, it's like a Beverly Hills housewife. She may be laughing, but you'd never tell from her face because it's not moving because all the Botox.
That's something that Orban has really done well with their gold standard Optimod system. They've been able to get it to where the needles are really not moving very much. But when you listen, it sounds like you've got so much dynamic range, and they found the secret sauce that does that.
And like you said, secret and expensive if you want that sound.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, I will tell you that Orban does have an Optimod that runs on PC software, and it's a software only version of their Optimod. I haven't heard it. I haven't played with it myself, but it is only $1,000. So
Only a
that's
grand
yeah,
compared to stereo tools. So you have to do that math.
that's right.
1,000 or zero, and find out what
Yeah,
works best for you, and all the
Yeah.
money you're raking in from your internet radio station.
Yeah.
Oh, because these are a gold mine. I mean, yes, internet radio is the quickest path to freedom and wealth that I've ever found. Thank you very much. Buy my course, and I could teach you how to make $1,000 a day from your internet. No, that's a video you'll never see me make. And that,
count me in.
you're on the list. Bob gets a commission. So, no, I mean, that's all you see on YouTube these days. But you're never going to hear that from me. And I know a lot of people, that's in the back of their mind when they do start a station. If it's not just from the pure passion of wanting to jump into radio, they think, well, now I have a station. How can I monetize it? Well, good luck. And I'm all behind you. And if you can, increase your listenership enough, if you can get enough ear holes onto your station consistently and prove that to potential sponsors, good for you. You have cracked a code that few ever will. I won't, because I don't give two shits about that. The amount of effort involved. First, now you're the radio programmer, you're the content creator, and now you're the salesperson having to knock on virtual doors. That's tricky. But if you have the bandwidth, maybe you have a team, great. I know we're going off on a tangent, but I think in a future video, I'm going to focus on, I think one of the best use cases for internet radio is community focused. And I did that profile of the station outside of London in the community in the UK who've done a bang up job just focusing on the local needs of their community. And I think internet radio is just fine tuned for that. It hits a spot that most big FMs could care less about. They don't care about small communities. And they are selling advertising because they found a way to get the community excited to tune in. And it makes sense for someone to give them some money to run spots. So that is another idea. While this isn't a direct tie into what we're talking about, it is in the fact of your sound quality. Actually, it does tie into the perceived value of your station. The better your sound, the more kind of big time you're going to feel to somebody. And most listeners won't be able to put their finger on it. Like we said earlier, they're not going to say, oh, they must be running the medium AGC setting on there. Maybe they should try hard next time. No, you don't know it, but you feel it with sound processing.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you have some sponsors trying to decide maybe where they want to spend their limited budget, it's going to come down to, sure, how many listeners you have, but what station just sounds the best. And that does enter the equation. And
that's right. Stereo tools, if you dare.
If you dare, this is what awaits for you. This is really a way to liberate your sound from, basement broadcaster quality up to the big time. And the great thing is it's free. And if, once again, this is even too off-putting and you're running to the corner to rock because this is too much for you to comprehend, then start small with RadioDJ's audio processor. It is capable, and at least it gives you some punch. Mm-hmm. And then when you need the Muhammad Ali, double punch, that's when you want a stereo tool. And after much coercing and arm pulling and a little blackmail too, which, hey, I'm
you know me too well.
Include in my toolbox. Bob, what are you willing to share with the Radio DJ Dude audience? Remember, I have those photos.
That's right. That's right. You do. I've got the preset that I'm currently using. It's a work in progress, but I'll give you what I've got on my stereo tool presets.
Wow. That's incredible. Free presets that already are probably going to, kick you up to the next level versus using RadioDJ's audio processor. So that's incredible. Thank you so much. That really is going to help people out because, we all want our stations to sound the very best possible, but a lot of times we don't even understand what that means. because a lot of people are new to this crazy world of broadcasting, and they think, well, whatever signal's coming out of Radio DJ, that's sound. I can hear it. That's what the world's going to hear. But they don't even understand that. No. That's just your base level. It could be so much better if you put the time in to tweak some settings. And I think even there was a point when I didn't know that Radio DJ had an audio processor, under the hood. This is so crucial, and you'll know it is once you start to hear the difference of an unprocessed versus a processed sound makes.
The difference between listening to a little transistor AM radio and going to a concert.
That's so true. It's just an explosion of sound and notes and frequencies that you didn't even know were there that can be unlocked and brought to life with the right settings. So don't be scared. Get your fingers and your mouse dirty. Be strong, Bob. We'll get you through this. I've got some bourbon waiting on the other end of the mix, so to speak. This has been so incredible. I thank you for your time and your expertise, because none of this comes natural to any of us. You have had to have had some, battle-tested experience to kind of know.
And hundreds of hours of poking and trying.
Like you said, you spent hundreds of hours tweaking with your 83 bands of multi-compression. Anyway, I have made you sweat long enough. You are such the pro.
Jeff, I do a like on every single one of your videos because I get at least 11% out of all of them.
11?
Yeah.
That is incredible. I only set the benchmark at 8% of enjoyment, but with the fact that you could squeeze 3% more out, that means the world to me. And you know what? Hang on a sec. That is just beautiful. This was my notice from the IRS for my audit, so it doesn't matter. Thank you again, Bob. We love you. You're going to now be the Radio DJ Dude official engineer.
Sweet.
We're calling on you again. Could be at 3:23 a.m. Be ready. Have your fax machine standing by.
Okay, Jeff. Sounds great.
Come on, everybody. Let's give it up a huge honking thank you to Bob Cervera. And I'll be completely honest with you. Bob was a Radio DJ Dude viewer who reached out. So I love the fact that we have so many pros out there. And if you have some secret sauce that you'd like to share, well, reach out to me. I'd love to have you on this channel. I'm always looking to expand and deliver the real deal to other passionate radio folks like you. I am Jeff, the Radio DJ Dude, and I hope you run with this. I hope you get in there and fine-tune your station sound, because that is a great way to pop off the dial, is to deliver a much better sound. Because a lot of stations that I hear, they're definitely not, using these great tips that Bob just dropped on us. And I mean, a lot of this could feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be, because Bob was generous enough to gift us with his stereo tool settings. Just check out the link in the description, pick those babies up, and I can't wait to hear how your sound changes. And if you like the sound of this video, well, please, I'd love a little like and subscribe from you. I do thank you very much. And until our next little radio rendezvous, you keep rocking those mics all over the world.